All right, guys, welcome. Welcome to my kitchen. Okay, so I am going to make a holiday roasted butternut squash. Okay, so this is a good recipe to have either for a dessert or a snack, or just to have it as a side dish with any of your meals. Okay. So I don't know if you guys noticed, there is a lot of squash right now, um, uh, pumpkins, and a lot of different kinds. The one I'm using right now is going to be the butternut squash, but over here I do have different varieties. So I'll show you that first of different varieties. And the good thing about all of these squashes is they're very high in vitamin C, and they're low fat. They are cholesterol free, sodium free, so it's very healthy for you guys. Okay, so the first one I'm going to show you is the one pretty much you've seen in different sizes, is the pumpkin. Is the pumpkin, right? The larger pumpkins are the ones we mostly use for decorations, right? To make the jack-o'-lanterns on Halloween. Those are the ones you're going to be seeing many of them right now, and a lot on people's porches. Okay. This pumpkin, the smaller the pumpkin, the actual better it is for baking. Okay, so this one they call it the pie pumpkin. Okay, and it tastes better than if you would use the larger pumpkin. Okay, so the larger the pumpkin, it's pretty hard to. It's basically the bigger pumpkins have a lot of water in them. Okay, so it's going to take a lot more of the actual inside of the pumpkin to make, if you're going to make a pie, okay, because it's mostly water. So these are the ones that are best used for pie. So this is what I'll be using to make a pie probably this weekend. Okay. Let me show you another one. This one is the acorn squash. Okay. This one, you can use this in soups. Okay. You can use this also in the recipe that I'm making today. So if you want to mix it up a little bit, you can use some of this one, and you can use the butternut squash. Okay. So this is a good one also. It's a little harder to cut. Well, all of these are a little hard to cut because the skin is so hard. But you can, on these, pretty much on this one, and the other two that I'm going to show you, you can eat the skin of these squashes. Okay. Then we have the spaghetti squash. This is one of my favorite when I make some spaghetti and I don't really feel like having the pasta. I'll make this one because all you do is cut this in half, put it upside down on a baking dish, and just put it in the oven and bake it. And I mean, it kind of looks like spaghetti when you take it out. Okay? And then you can just throw your favorite seasoning. You can even add spaghetti sauce to it if you'd like. So this is a good one for to use instead of pasta. Okay. Okay. Then there's this one. This one is the kombucha. Now this one, I've never used this one before. I saw it at the store. I'm like, this looks interesting. So this one, I'm going to actually use this for a soup. Okay, it's in between these the taste between the butternut and a pumpkin. So they say it's between that taste. Like I said, I haven't tasted it yet, but it is a Japanese pumpkin, and that's what they call it, a Japanese pumpkin. But I'm going to use it as a soup. So I'll tell you if you guys are on next week, I'll let you know how this one tastes. Okay. And all of this, all of these, you can actually find them in your supermarket. I bought all of these for, I believe they were around 99 cents a pound, and that's pretty good right now for these pumpkins, for these squashes. And one that I use a lot in my soups is a chayote, and that's probably familiar to a lot of Hispanic cultures. I'm using chayote in their soups, so that's what I use this one for. Has anybody ever used the chayote for another dish before? No? Okay. You can unmute yourself and just, you've used it for this, or you can write it in your chat. Yes. Okay. Andrea has used it before. Okay. What was the other dish, if I may ask? Or un guisado. Oh, nice. Okay. Great. All right. Okay. So in the recipe, it calls for 2 pounds of butternut squash. So this is a little over 2 pounds here, but I probably won't use the whole thing. And then it calls for some walnuts. So I'm going to add, now if you don't want to use walnuts, you can use pecans, pretty much any other nut if you want, or you can basically leave out the nuts, okay? But then I'll be using a 1/4 cup of walnuts, and I'll also be using a 1/4 cup of cranberries. And this is another thing that you can opt out. You can use other dry, maybe cherry, like dried cherries. You can use that also. Raisins you can use. Okay, but the recipe does call for the cranberries, but you can substitute that. Okay, and it calls for some dried sage. Okay, now I'm going to substitute the sage for some thyme. Okay, so the thyme is kind of like the relative of the sage, so it's pretty much has pretty much the same flavor. So I'm just substituting the sage for the thyme. Okay. And some salt and some pepper. Okay. And it also calls for some canola oil, which you will be drizzled out, mixing that up with your butternut squash, and some 100% pure maple syrup also. Okay. Now the other option is if you want to bring out the flavor of the nuts or the dry fruits, you can add a little bit of the cider vinegar if you'd like. Okay. Again, that's optional. Okay. All right. So first, I'm going to show you how to cut the butternut squash. Okay. Now the butternut squash is very hard to cut. I did cut one ahead of time earlier, and it took all my muscles to cut it. Okay. So what I did with this one is I with a knife, you just make little slits like that, okay, all over the squash, okay, and you put it in the microwave for 5 minutes, okay, and that's going to make it easier, much easier to cut. I hope so. So, but if you don't want to put it in the microwave, then if you got bigger muscles than I do, then you can just make sure it's a really sharp knife, okay? I found it also easier if I use a serrated knife, okay? That's a little bit much easier, but I am going to use this knife. So the first thing you want to do is you want to cut off the ends. Okay. Oh, that is much easier than the one I cut before. Okay. Let's cut up the ends. on each side. So it's a little bit harder. Okay. Okay. So you got the two ends cut here. And then you want to cut maybe like in the middle of it. Okay, like that. Okay. Now you have a flat side, okay? And every time you cut something, you want to make sure it has a flat side because a lot of these squashes tend to move around. And just for your safety and the safety of others around you, you don't want to have it roll around, okay? So now we have a flat side here, and I'm just going to cut right through the middle. Just like that. Then what you want to do is you want to scoop out the seeds, okay? So you want to get a spoon and just scoop out, better spoon than this. I'm going to use a knife just to cut around it. Just to loosen up all the seeds here, okay? Now you can eat the seeds. They're very high in fiber. So that's a very healthy snack instead of eating some chips or cookies for a snack. You can snack on some pumpkin seeds, on some, well, this one butternuts seeds, but you can make them like you would pumpkin seeds. Okay? You can roast them in the oven just the same way. Okay? So I took some of those seeds off, and then I'll just scoop that off with the spoon. Okay? Okay, you do the same thing with the other one. Just scoop that off. Okay. All right. So now you have your squash. Now you can leave the skin on if you'd like. I did peel it off on the one that I made. It's really up to you. If you want to leave it on, you may. But it's a pretty, according to each person. Also because it would taste different. Okay. But pretty much on all of these different squash, you can leave the skin on, except for the pumpkin. The pumpkin is a little bit more tougher, so you really don't want to eat the skin of that. Okay. So the easy way is to just peel it off. Okay. Or if you didn't stick it in the microwave, it might be easier to just cut down like this. Okay. So either way, you can either peel it or just cut it down with a knife. Okay. So now that you've peeled it, you can start cutting in quarters, just down the middle. Okay. So pretty much like 3/4, kind of like this is a good size. So once you have them all cut, which did that ahead of time, okay? So this one is a little bit more tender, so it'll probably take a little bit because I put it in the microwave to make it easier to cut. It might take a little less time than what the recipe calls for. This one is the one that I cut without putting it in the microwave. Okay? So once it's all cut, then you get your baking. Now, remember, before you start, you want to preheat the oven. Okay, so the oven is preheated to 375. Okay, now you don't have to add. Sometimes on some of your squash that you do roast, it tells you to spray it with a little cooking spray so it won't stick to the pan, or you can use foil. You can do that also. But since this is going to already have some oil in it, you don't have to do that on this one, for this recipe, okay? So, we have already cut in quarters. And in the recipe, it says to add your oil. Okay. So I'm going to add canola oil to this one. But again, it's up to you on which one you want to use. You can use I would recommend olive oil only because it's on a high temperature, but you can use avocado oil. You can use vegetable oil if you'd like also. Okay, the recipe is posted on there. Okay, so you're going to put 1 tablespoon of 2 tablespoons of canola oil in here. Okay. And you'll just mix that up. It's much easier if you do it with a spatula. That way you get all of your squash coated with the oil. Okay. All right. Then you're going to add your spices. You're going to add your pepper. Now it does call for a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, but I just pretty much shake it. I just want to make sure that it's all covered with pepper. So just pretty much just to your tasting also. I like pepper. Okay. Make sure all the pieces are covered with pepper. And then you can add a little bit of salt. Again, you can leave the salt out if you want. It's okay, but it doesn't take much salt. Okay. Then you can add your sage or your thyme. Okay. Now, once that is all mixed up, then you can put it in your baking pan. You want to put it in a single layer. You don't want them on top of each other because then they won't cook very good. So you want to make sure they're all spread out. Okay, because it does tell you in the recipe to leave it for about 35 minutes. But you want to check it maybe after 20 minutes, and you want to just kind of turn it with a spatula so it'll all bake evenly. Okay. All right. Then you put this in your oven and bake it for 35 minutes. So while that's baking, then you're going to, you can use the same bowl, it's fine. You're going to add the, well, before we do that, you want to roast your nuts a little bit, okay? So you want to, in a pan, okay, I'm going to use this one. You can either add butter or oil, okay? So since this one isn't going to be cooked at a high temperature, you can use the olive oil for this if you'd like, okay? So you can add the, it only calls for it's 1 tablespoon of butter if you're going to use butter, or you can use the 1 tablespoon of olive oil for this recipe, okay? So if you add the oil on there, and then if you use butter, you want to let it melt first, okay? And then you put it on your stove and you add the nuts in there, okay? So just add them on there and then let them roast a little bit, probably for about 2 minutes, because you will start you'll start smelling the nuts that you're cooking here, okay? So you do that, and once that's done, then you can add it, you take it out of the stove, and you put it in your pan, and you add the cranberries in there, okay? So I'm just going to put this over. Let it roast a little bit. Now this one, I'm going to add olive oil on this one, because the one that I did before, I did add butter on it, but it didn't bring out the flavor. Does the olive oil or butter change the taste? Yeah, yes, it does. It does, because when I used the butter, it tasted too buttery, and I don't know, I didn't really like the whole buttery taste on that. So on this one, I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil instead. Just a little bit of olive oil. And like I said, you want to just mix it up and put it on a medium heat, and just until you kind of smell that. And I think the butter took out also the smell of that, of the walnuts, because it wasn't really as strong as I thought it would be. Like I said, the butter kind of overpowered the smell of the walnuts. Okay. So once that is done, then you will mix them up with your cranberries. Okay. And that's a 1/4 teaspoon of cranberries. And you're going to add your, we'll wait till I get the nuts back in here. And you're going to add the maple syrup. Okay. And that's pretty much it. And then once your squash is out of the oven, then you will mix it. You will put this with your squash. You'll mix it up, and you'll have your dish. Okay. Okay. Well, that's being roasted there. Does anybody have any questions? No questions? Okay. All right. Well, while we're waiting for the nuts to to roast over there. I do want to show you something. Like I said, one of these, probably the kombucha over here, I'm going to use for soup. So you will have a sheet that looks like this sent to your email. Okay, it is Soups Made Simple. Okay, so it tells you what to add on there. Like when you're making a soup, if you want to add protein, it says, you know, you should kind of saute the meat before, and then you add, you know, your vegetables. So it'll give you a list of different choices you can make, or you can do your own choice of any protein, vegetable, and then the liquid. And then if you want to add a whole grain, you can add a whole grain to your soup. Okay, so this is just a guide if you want to look at to make a soup. Okay, but the soup that I'm going to make is the what's it called? It is called a roasted kabuchi squash soup. Okay, I actually got this soup. Okay, so we have that listed there. Okay, but you can go online and just Google any of these squashes, and you can look at the recipes, different recipes that come up. Okay, and the myplate.gov, choosemyplate.gov is also a good site that has a lot of good recipes. Okay, you can get that. You also will be getting in your email the recipe with pasta with roasted vegetables. Okay. And this is another good way to have your kids eat more vegetables. It's like roasting the vegetables kind of brings out a different flavor than if you would just boil them. I know a lot of kids, they're very choosy on how they like their vegetables. Some kids, you know, even adults, they don't like raw vegetables. They'll either prefer them cooked. Okay, and there's some really choosy kids that they will not see a vegetable at all. They won't, if it's in the dish, they'll just put it to the side. Okay. Well, with these roasted vegetables, what you can do, if they love pasta, you can just if they have like their favorite like a spaghetti sauce, you can always throw the roasted vegetables in the blender and blend it with the sauce. They'll never know it's in there. Okay. Right, so that did bring out the flavor in my my nuts over here. Okay, so all that together, I say you put it all together, and you add your syrup in there. Okay. A little bit more roasted than I wanted them to be, but let me show you the finished product. Okay, so I had to put the vent on because they got a little bit too roasted, but they're good anyway. But here is the finished butternut squash. Doesn't that look delicious? It is. It's pretty good, and it has like a sweet flavor to it, because you can taste a little bit of the honey on there, and the nuts give it that flavor. So I hope you guys like this recipe, and if you are in my call next week, you guys can tell me how it went. Okay.